Eddie, have you been to Oklahoma City?
No.
I'm going to assume.
Have you?
I have not. I've been to Oklahoma. I can tell you, it was in 2007. And I highly recommend this for anyone. And I'm being totally serious. In 2007 or 8, I can't remember the years, I was part of a downsize in radio at formerly Emmis, which now, of course, we are Radio 1 now, which purchased Emmis because I came back to work for Emmis. But a lot of people don't remember this, and I barely do because it was for like 3 weeks, and it was very early in the morning. But I did the morning show on WIBC. And there's a reason I'm bringing this all up, because Oklahoma City and Houston, who is in Indiana tonight, taking on the Pacers. I had been laid off and just kind of had this uncertain future as to what in the world I was going to do. And at that time, I had been to 46 U.S. states, and I knew that I had 4 left. And I didn't strategically plan this because the 4 that I had left were Oklahoma, North Dakota, New Mexico, and Utah. So you can't exactly knock that out in one fell swoop, right? But I was sitting on the couch probably 2 days after I'd been laid off, and I just said, you know what? I'm just going to get in the car and just drive. Like Forrest Gump, but I'm just going to drive. And I'm going to drive to Oklahoma and knock off Oklahoma off my list.
Drive, Jake, drive.
That's right. And I got in the car, and I put my music on, and I told a couple of people, like, here's what I'm doing, and I'll be back hopefully in 4 or 5 days, whatever, and I just drove. And I just went and kind of blocked out everything, and I got to Oklahoma. I decided that I wanted to go to Miami, Oklahoma, which is a town in the far northeastern corner of Oklahoma. And I thought, well, this would be cool. Steve Owens is from there, the Heisman winner. They have a casino, it looks like. I got there at like 4 in the morning, and I woke up at 10 or whatever, and literally it was a Walmart parking lot with a trailer that had a sign that said casino on it and a Subway. That was the whole town. So I thought, well, I've been to Oklahoma. I can check that off. I could say I've been into Oklahoma. And then I drove from Oklahoma to North Dakota to get that one out of the way, because why not? I had no agenda, no timetable. And I made a pact to stop at every historical marker on the way. If there was a brown sign on the side of the interstate of a historical marker, I pulled off for it. And after 5 days of that or something, I got home and just had a clearer head. And then I had a better idea of what I wanted to do and the things that are important to me and whatever else. I highly recommend it to anybody. But because I drove to Oklahoma and did not fly it, I am curious, Eddie, if you could look up for me, please, the flight time from the in-air flight time from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma to Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm going to guess that it is a 2 hour and 10-minute flight. That is strictly a guess. 2 hours and 10 minutes. That's probably a little high. Hour and 40, I'll go with. Now, you're flying charter if you're the Houston Rockets, so that helps. It's not like you're going through TSA security and waiting for somebody that's got to switch seats and waiting on somebody that can't get their bag in the overhead. I mean, they're doing charter. It's totally different. What does it say is the flight time?
I'm trying to find that.
Okay.
First.
Hang on, let me just go ahead and Google that for you.
Well, I am, and it didn't pop up.
It didn't pop up flight time, Oklahoma City to Indianapolis?
No.
I'm going to guess. Let's just say for the sake of argument. Now, the game last night was an 8 o'clock tip Eastern time in Oklahoma City for the Houston Rockets, okay? And then, so what time would you say that game ended? Probably 10:30 our time? Is that about right?
Probably.
And then, so 10:30, and then they've got to do, some interviews, get a shower, get something to eat, whatever. They probably got on the plane at what time would you guess?
Midnight. Depending on how far the drive is.
1 hour and 52 minutes is the flight time, direct, okay? So that means that they probably got to the hotel around 3 a.m. Is that a fair statement?
Oh, yeah, probably.
Would they have a shoot-around this morning? Maybe get up, walk
Most
around?
teams have gone away from doing shoot-arounds in the morning.
They do, yeah, you're right. Middle of the afternoon, though, do they go to the field house? And, usually you can see guys walking around downtown, especially now because there's no one else downtown, so it's easy to spot them.
Especially since the Jerry bus is gone.
That's right. So my point being, it would seem as though for the Pacers, this is a prime game for the picking tonight. But the other side of that is the Rockets, they were pretty smart about it. The Rockets rested some people. Fred VanVleet's been out for about 3 weeks with a foot injury, came back, played a game, did not play last night. A lot of their rotational players were rested last night in preparation of the fact that they have to go on back-to-back in play tonight. So we'll see whether or not that is to advantage Indiana. But that's a big one tonight for the Pacers and the Rockets, because then the Pacers have to go on the road themselves, 2 in a row in Atlanta and then Chicago before coming back. And they've got a couple of big games with Milwaukee, notably, on the schedule upon the return. And the Bucks, both of those games that Indiana's playing Milwaukee, they are on the backside of back-to-backs. So that is a challenge when they find themselves locked in right now, tied with Milwaukee for the 4. So not locked in, but they are tied with Milwaukee for the 4 seed in the East. College basketball, a lot going on tonight. We'll begin with, Eddie, I'll let you choose, actually. Would you like to begin tonight the conversation talking about Indiana or talking about Purdue?
Let's talk about Purdue first.
I would agree with that, because
Also,
it seems
shout out
like
to the Horizon League. Their tournament starts tonight.
Barbasol, baby.
Mhm.
Barbasol, the sponsor for, it's the beginning of it all, taking place at the Coliseum, right?
Yep.
Of course, the Coliseum in the State Fairgrounds, they have a new sponsor, right?
The State Fairgrounds or?
The Coliseum.
Oh,
It
I
was
don't know.
the Pepsi Coliseum for a long time. It was the Indiana Farmers Coliseum for a long time. They have a newer sponsor for the Coliseum. But if you just say the Coliseum, people know what you're talking about. And the Horizon League, of course, based right here in downtown Indianapolis. They have a couple on both the women's and men's teams, some teams that have been red hot over the course of the year. But they are always the first. I love it, because they're always the first to go ahead and get things underway, right?
That's
Start
right.
out championship weeks, women's, men's, all of it. And Barbasol is the title sponsor for that. And now, do you use shaving cream, Eddie?
No.
Boy, I'll tell you that Barbasol, you get a little, and then you put it on there. And especially, I have the little thing that heats it. So when it comes out, it's nice and warm. It's like being at the barbershop. It's wonderful. Sometimes I just walk around the house wearing it on my face, literally. It's tremendous.
Not to be confused with anything else like whipped cream or something like that.
Not mayonnaise. I can assure you of
Yeah.
that. No, that Barbasol, when it comes out, it's oh man. Then it goes on. It's just that smooth, everything about it, right?
Oh, yeah.
It has that almost eucalyptus scent. It's refreshing, is what it is. So Purdue taking on Rutgers tonight. Rutgers is fascinating to me because I really thought going into the year, like, wasn't Rutgers supposed to be decent? Didn't they have, am I correct here? Didn't Rutgers have like 9 5-star recruits coming in this season?
Yeah, they had Harper and Ace Bailey.
Ace Bailey. I mean, Ace Bailey's, and again, I realize that there has been some attrition within Rutgers and their roster, but I thought they were going to be better. But nonetheless, for Purdue tonight, a good chance to kind of put that that losing streak behind them, because it was a good win against UCLA. They've got 20 wins. Obviously, they are in good position for the seeding of the NCAA tournament. You
They just have
hold
to
serve
stay-
here. What's that?
They just have to stay top 4. That way they avoid having to play a day earlier in the Big Ten
You're
tournament.
right. Now, did you give me a tournament there?
Twice. I was wondering how long you would.
It's a tournament.
It's a tournament.
No, it's a tournament. Yeah, Purdue needs to basically hold serve here and continue with the strong play that they're going to get. And you know they're going to get it from Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Wren. You know, one of the better discussions may be if you had to pick one of those two, if each school in the Big Ten had to select a player, if this were like an election, you've got to submit your nominee for Conference Player of the Year, but you can only select one that you feel gives you the best chance for your university to be represented. Which of the two is it for Purdue?
I think it's Braden Smith.
I would tend to agree with you on that. I think he's the more important player to them for certain. Trey Kaufman-Wren might be the one that, although I don't know, Braden Smith probably would start about anywhere. But those two, though, the problem is I was just having a conversation the other day about Purdue. And we've talked about this on the air. I have a conversation, I guess, every day about Purdue on this radio station. But It's just the fact that you need consistent auxiliary help, be it C.J. Cox, be it Miles Colvin, Heidi. I think we know Lawyer. We know what he is. Caleb First, at this point, we know what he is. You just need wing help above and beyond what they've gotten. And Purdue appears to be, in the tournament, a team that I think is pretty matchup dependent. If they get good matchups and they get teams that play a style similar to Purdue, that don't attack those areas of weakness, then Purdue could make some noise in the tournament. Do I think they're a Final Four team? No. Do I think that they are a Sweet 16 team? Yes. And then maybe if a break goes their way, maybe they win 3 games in the tournament. But right now, and I don't know, is Joe Lunardi on vacation? Do we know? Have we checked on this?
I believe he updates those weekly right now. And then
do you have the breaking news sounder by chance? Joe Lunardi has released within the last hour his latest bracketology.
Oh, that's right. It's on Tuesdays and Fridays for the NCAA tournament.
He now has the Boilermakers of Purdue. Would you like to guess, Eddie, without looking, please, what seed he has Purdue?
See, they were 4 seed last week. I'm going to stick with 4 seed again. Or last Friday. I'll stick with them still being a 4.
I can't do a Greg Gumbel, the late, great Greg Gumbel impersonation, but we'll do this as if it is Selection Sunday. In the South, these are Thursday, Saturday games. I don't know if they are. They may be Friday, Sunday. The 5 seed, Clemson, Brad Brownell. Many people think that he might be going back to his home state of Indiana, but before that, he's got to take on, in the 5-12 game, the winner of Nebraska and Boise State. The Broncos getting in the last minute with their selection. The winner of that matchup will then take on the winner between 13th-seeded High Point. High Point, of course, a school in North Carolina that has movie theaters in the dorms, and everybody talks about it, and they'll take on the 4th seed out of the Big Ten, Purdue. So he has the Boilermakers, the 4 seed. Now, what's interesting right now in terms of Lunardi, and again, I mean, the matchups are obviously fictional, but I do think that Joe Lunardi, I don't know that he's necessarily fed information, but he has, I think, a really good, he's almost dead on. Usually out of the 68 teams, he has like 67 of them correct. So whatever formula he is using is more often than not completely dialed in. If you look right now at what he has, what seed or out, which one do you think it is, Eddie? Do you believe that he has the Hoosiers of Indiana?
Well, based off of how things went over the weekend, you had Indiana smothering Washington, and then you had some help around them with teams losing like North Carolina. I think Nebraska lost a game over the weekend, so I'm going to say Indiana has moved its way out of the last 4 in, and I don't know what they call it in that group before.
The play-in game or whatever they call it, you mean?
No, so like the last 4 in, those are typically your 4 teams that are in those play-in games.
The last 4 buys?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's where things stand right now. Also in the South region, these games to be played in Denver.
Now he had them, Indiana, as a play-in team, and if they won, they played the Gales, right?
That's what he had last week.
Okay.
But this week, these games to be played in Denver out of the South. The 3 seed, the Wildcats of Kentucky.
Denver?
Kentucky will be taking on Eddie Garrison is super excited to go to it. Kentucky will be taking on Utah Valley, who I believe at one time was coached by Mark Madsen from Stanford. Not sure if he is still there. The winner of that game will take on the winner of the 6 seed, St. Mary's, and their head coach, Randy Bennett, with Indiana ties, who we need to get on this program coming up here in the next week or so because he's a fun dude. St. Mary's will be taking on the rising 11 seed, Indiana. Ooh. Mike Woodson's Hoosiers getting in with one of the last buys. Now, here's what's interesting. The last 4 buys, that means the last 4 that did not have to do a play-in game, and then the last 4 in. If you look at those 2 groups, with Indiana doing a coaching search, it's interesting. The last 4 buys, Baylor. Is Scott Drew an Indiana candidate? San Diego State. Georgia, who, of course, were recently coached by a guy who took that job after being fired from Indiana. And Indiana, those are the last 4 byes. The last 4 in, Ohio State, who Indiana will play once they come back from the West Coast to finish their regular season. Arkansas, John Calipari, who nobody, I'm telling you right now, nobody wants to see Arkansas. I bet you if you were to survey coaches, what team that may sneak their way in would you least want to see? I think Arkansas would get a lot of votes. Nebraska and Boise State, the last 4 in. First 4 out. Oklahoma, coached by another guy whose name I've seen very peripherally in the Indiana discussion, and Porter Mosher. Xavier, North Carolina, and Texas. Then you get down to the next 4 out. Now, these teams have got to be packing for the NIT, right?
Maybe.
I mean, if you're in the next 4 out category, you got to have all hell break loose. SMU, Cincinnati, Villanova, and Wake Forest. So Indiana tonight in Oregon, at this point, I mean, it feels like if that's the case right now, if Indiana gets a quad 1 win on the road at Oregon tonight, seemingly they're in really good shape, right?
I would think so. Unless they don't,
Unless they get blown out by Ohio State. But if Ohio State's also in, it sounds as though easiest way to think of this. You ever been sitting on a floor waiting for an elevator and the elevator opens up and you're like, oh gosh, like that's a crowded elevator.
Yes.
So the elevator doors just opened and Indiana and Ohio State are standing on the floor. And they're like, yeah, I mean, somebody might step off to get off on that floor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's, let's say, in that situation, let's say that's Arkansas. They get beat, they get blown out, whatever, so they're now off the elevator. Or Nebraska. Now there's room for one of them in. Indiana's kind of, although Indiana in this case is already kind of on the elevator, but you get what I'm saying. Are Indiana and Ohio State attached at the hip? Or can they separate? Because I think if Ohio State beats Indiana, does that then take the place of Indiana and bounce Indiana all the way out? Or do they say, look, Indiana losing at home to Ohio State, who we also have as right on the bubble or as one of the last ones in, that's excusable, especially because they beat Oregon. If they lose tonight, do they have to beat Ohio State? If they lose tonight, and I know you still have the Big Ten tournament, and they could win the Big Ten tournament, don't get me wrong. The same with Purdue. If Purdue loses out here, and let's say they lose going into the Big Ten tournament, and then they get upset in the first round of the Big Ten tournament by Northwestern or something, does Purdue slide all the way to, say, a 6 seed, or are they solid in the 4-5 range?
It's all fascinating.
Now, do you want to know the number 1 seeds? Can you, Eddie Garrison, right now tell me the 4 number 1 seeds?
Well, 2 are obvious. I think 3 actually are pretty obvious. Your number 1 overall, Auburn.
Correct.
2, Duke.
Correct. 3,
Houston.
Correct.
Now, the 4th one is the tricky one for me because I forget who's right there.
Yeah. This team's been, I will say, this team has been in the discuss. It's not like some late comer. They've been really good. They've had a few losses here and there, but they have had their turn on top of the mountain.
Chomp chomp?
No. Good guess. You're going with Florida there, obviously, right?
Uh-huh.
The number 2 seeds.
Tennessee.
Florida is 1. Florida, Michigan State, Alabama, Iowa State, and Tennessee. One of those is the number 1. The rest are number 2s.
I'll go with Tennessee being the other number 1 seed.
Tennessee is indeed the other number 1 seed. And then you get to the number 2s that I just mentioned.
So who's going out west?
I mean, who knows, right?
Right.
But right now, he has Tennessee as the 1 seed going out west. And that's actually, here's the thing, though. This is what's fascinating to me about the NCAA tournament. If Tennessee is ranked as the 4th 1 seed, but if you look at the number 2 seeds, Michigan State, Alabama, Florida, and Iowa State, wouldn't you most want to go into the region with Michigan State? Doesn't Michigan State feel like the number 2 seed that is the most susceptible?
Yes.
I mean, that's where I'd want to go with it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Big show lined up for you today. We'll continue talking about the NCAA tournament. We'll also get into one discussion of, is there something going on with the Colts that's a smokescreen? Is there smoke rising? Is Eagle Creek right now suddenly under cloud cover because of a smoke screen that's coming out of West 56th? We'll get into that with Stephen Holder coming up at 1 o'clock. Scott Agnes will talk a little Pacers Rockets with us at 2 o'clock. When we come back, a guy that had the kind of weekend that you would think is excitable, but he was totally even keel. And did it lead to fried chicken? We'll explain with the guy that won over the weekend for the 12th time, or is it 13th within his sport? I don't know. We'll introduce you to him, and we'll explain what I'm talking about next. joining us now on the program. Alex, welcome back home to Indianapolis as a winner. Congratulations. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm great. I'm happy. I'm hungry, and I just couldn't ask for a better start of a 2025 season.
Now, by the way, you said you're hungry. I know that after every win, you used to go out for fried chicken. Does that mean that you're hungry because you didn't go out for fried chicken, or you didn't get enough of it?
No. I stopped that. After every person, like almost every fan, was bringing me like fried chicken vouchers or fried chicken bucks, and I was like, no. I need to stop this. So no, I'm hungry for more, man. Hungry to go racing a thermal in a couple of weeks, and hungry to be fighting for more wins this year.
Okay, let's go back first off to the race itself because. I said on the broadcast it was Alex Palou doing Alex Palou things, which is you find your way towards the front, and then once you get up front, it seems as though you're able to just pull away. Now, you were being pursued a little bit by Newgarden. You had Stingray Robb in front of you who was actually ran a pretty good pace, but he was trying to stay on the lead lap. That slowed you up just a little bit. What was your mindset going through that, and how much were you having to kind of balance between pushing to stay out front and also making sure that you were staying back a little bit to preserve tires, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting race with different strategies, but once we got up front, we were able to quite easily open a big gap with Newgarden, but then started catching traffic. At that point, it's frustrating more than anything because the traffic can use the overtake, like all the push to pass that they have left, to just try and stay in front. While us as leaders, it's risky if you do that. Yeah, you maybe start burning, I don't know, like 30 seconds or so, and you get by one or two cars. But the issue is that if there's a restart, you're done. Like you're gonna start up front, and your competition, like the 2 car and the 9 car, would have had more push to pass than me. So that's why I couldn't really get past the traffic easily because they were overusing all the overtake that they had left, and I was just saving it in case there was a late restart in the race, and I didn't want to get overtaken by the competition.
One of the big storylines in the race, Alex Palou is our guest on the always busy and available to be sponsored guest line. And Alex shows that sponsorship works because DHL, he gets front and center for radio and television coverage over the course of the race. One of the storylines was the fact that Scott Dixon did not have a radio, your teammate. And so he couldn't communicate with his team. He had to kind of barometer between you and you were also with him on when he was going to pit. Trying to get an idea of what was going on. Were you made aware of that? And because he was your teammate, did you have orders also to kind of guide Dixon, if you would, in terms of strategies or how you were able to in any way help him through the rest of the race?
No, nobody told me during the race. I knew it because I was cutting the cable before the race started for the Dixon.
That's right. You made it easy, right?
Yeah, I just didn't want to fight with him on track, but no, I'm joking. We didn't know, the 10-car stand didn't know that they didn't have a radio. And honestly, the rules at CGR is that we're allowed to race as hard as we want to be raced. So we didn't have rules of like helping him or protecting him or anything else, but I mean, he did an amazing job. It was a tough race strategy-wise, and not to have a radio and to stop. We have alarms of like how much fuel we have in the car, and you can make the decisions, but ultimately you want to stop at the perfect time. Like it's not always better to go until the end. And in fact, we were able to pass him doing an undercut and pitting one lap earlier in him. So, I mean, it's a shame for him, but I'm glad that we're able to get the win and that he was able to get a second place for the team and locking that 1-2 to start the 2025 season.
For those like myself, but for those listening that are not as familiar with racing, Alex, obviously communication with the team when you're in the car is important because you want to tell them what changes to make to the car when you come into pit, right? Like, hey, add more wing here, or I'm feeling a little bit loose, tighten the car up, those kinds of things. The fuel you can see, I think probably even like the pressures you can see, but what is the most important thing that he would not be able, or you, if you didn't have a radio, would not be able to relay, and how would you relay that information, or do you just kind of have to hope the car holds on?
I think there's different stuff. We go from like traffic management on strategies. Like it's not the same to pit on an open window when you go out and you have a clear out lap so you can go fast and you don't lose lap time. But then you go to engine mappings, like to make sure that you run not always at the highest power, like not running. It's not always better to run at the highest power because the engine doesn't like it to have 100 laps of pure pushing. So that's why we have engineers that tell us what engine mappings to have at those times, how to adjust the car for next stops. Like we need to communicate with the engineer to let them know if we want different tire pressures, if we want more front wing, less front wing. There's a lot of small details that it can make you lose a race or win a race. So it's tough, but honestly, it's amazing that he was still able to finish second.
Listen, you've had Alex Palou, and now we can kind of put this to bed, right? I mean, you've had issues in the past, or challenges, I guess I should say, in the past, contractually and with moving teams and then coming back or not moving teams. None of it ever bothered you. I mean, literally, you walk around, and as I always tell people, you're like one aspirin from a coma. You're just so even. You're like just chill, right? Eddie was just asking me, and it's a great question, so I'm going to ask you. He said, hey, Jake, how does Alex Palou stay so calm? I said, I don't know. I'm going to ask him. When you're in the car and all hell's breaking loose, how do you stay Alex Palou so calm?
I don't know, man. It's not that hard. At the end of the day, my job is only to go fast and to do the best I can with the car I have. And there's moments where everything goes amazingly, like in St. Pittsburgh this past weekend, and I'm able to just enjoy every single lap and everything goes well for me. But I know that there's going to be moments where things don't go the way they have to be, like Milwaukee last year, where we were fighting for the championship and suddenly the car stopped and the battery failed and we lost like 30 laps. So at that moment, you can either, I don't know, just give up or get angry or just understand that it's the nature of the sport and nature of life. I feel really lucky to be in the position I am today. And even when I'm struggling in my job, it's still the best job ever. So I cannot complain, and I just need to give the best I have every day. So, honestly, I think it's not so hard to do it in the position I am.
One of the things that slows down race car drivers, Alex, is, and I've seen this, I mean, I've been covering it now for close to 20 years, and you can just kind of tell when you go back and look at statistics that a lot of times when drivers get married, have a baby, life changes a little bit. Sometimes just the going over the edge changes a little bit. Now, I've actually traveled back from races on the same flight as you, and you're carrying the baby in the baby carrier and doing all the dad things and providing the bottle and everything. It's pretty impressive to watch. But it hadn't changed you, has it? I mean, in terms of slowing you down. But how has being a dad in the last year and a half, I think it's been now, how's it changed you?
Oh, it's amazing. I love it. I love every single second of it. It brings a different kind of joy than racing, and when you combine both of them, it's just living the dream for me every day. So I mean, it's hard. It's as every parent know, it's a lot of work. It's like nonstop. But in terms of racing, I think it's the opposite. It's changed me to the good of like working more and making sure that I give 100% of myself and I work whenever I have time. I used to have all day just for me, and now I have just a few hours for me and all the rest of the day for her. So I need to make sure that those hours that I have for me that I make the most of it, and I work out, and I keep myself in best shape possible. I communicate with the team, and I don't lose time. So I mean, I'm loving this new dad life, let's say. It's making me push even more. And as you can see, even McLaughlin, he just became a dad, and he went on the streets of St. Petersburg and just pulled by 1.5 or 2 tenths. So I mean, yeah, I don't think that becoming a dad makes you slow down.
Okay, you are native, Alex Palou. Alex Palou is our guest here on Query and Company. You are native to Barcelona, Spain. I have made no bones about the fact to you and to others that since my trip to Barcelona, it might be the best city in the world that I've visited. It's absolutely beautiful. I mean, I love everything about Barcelona. But I'm curious. You now live in Indianapolis, okay? So I want to know what part of Indianapolis makes you feel like you're in Barcelona.
I mean, they're pretty different. They're pretty different.
Slightly.
Yeah, I don't know. I would agree with you that Barcelona is really special. Obviously, I grew up there. But I'm loving life here. Like I have a house now here, and it feels like my home now.
What's your favorite part about
Barcelona,
Indy?
Indy, I don't know. Like I've been living in Carmel for a long time, so I really like downtown Carmel. I think just like going out in the morning during the weekends, it's pretty sweet and calm. So I don't know. I would say that's my favorite place together with the IMF.
If somebody was to say, I was in this restaurant the other day getting something to eat, and I'm pretty sure I saw Alex Palou. The restaurant that would be the best odds that, in fact, it was you was where?
Honestly, since I moved to the house, we've been so busy and just loving so much our time here. I've not eaten this year in 2025 in a restaurant in Indiana yet.
Really?
So I'll need to. Yeah, honestly, we've been cooking at home, and we've been busy traveling with Daytona testing and St. Pete. So yeah, 2025, I would have said it's impossible that you saw me on a restaurant.
Well, I'll tell you this much. Once it's a daughter, right? Your baby is a daughter, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So once she's old enough, Alex, and you're living in Indy, and she's, let's say, 6 or 7, and you've got like 2 Indy 500s under your belt, you can do like every other young person in Carmel and go to the Sun King Brewing and have a cold beer while your daughter runs around playing soccer on the little fake grass there. That's the Carmel thing
Absolutely.
to do.
Once the weather is better, I'll do that.
All right, sounds good.
The weather is getting better now.
Hey, lastly, Thermal's up next, but a couple of weeks off. Is it tough to now get the break after a win, get started, get the juices flowing, and now we got to sit and wait for a couple of weeks?
Oh no, it's great. I mean, we can still dream and talk about our win for 2 more weeks now. So it's great. It's great that we have some time to prepare Thermal and the next couple of races that we have coming up. But yeah, I'll have Sebring as well next week. So I'm excited for that to keep me in shape. But yeah, it's all good, man. I know that it's going to be a busy season once we start, I would say, after May. So it's good to have a small 2-week break.
Alex Palou, winner in St. Petersburg. It is officially win number 12 because last year an exhibition at Thermal, but Thermal is an official race this year, so he'll bump it to 13 and 14, depending on how you tabulate it, if he were to win just outside of Palm Springs in a couple of weeks. Alex, we will see you there. I appreciate the time, all right?
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
All right, a pleasure. Alex Palou, DHL Honda for Chip Ganassi Racing as we roll along here, Tuesday edition, Aquarium Company. Thank you to Alex Palou for his time. If you just missed it, that will be available in podcast form. We ask, as always, that you begin listening to the podcast after the 6 o'clock hour, unless you're listening to the Pacer game, which tonight they'll be taking on the Houston Rock. Basically, what I'm getting at is if you're not listening to this radio station live, then you can listen in podcast.
That's right.
1075thefan.com, where you can get that. My name is Jake Query. Eddie Garrison, the voice you just heard. It is Query and Company here on a Tuesday. Alex Palou, appreciate his time after the win in St. Petersburg. And again, a couple of weeks off before Thermal Club, which is outside of Palm Springs. Last night, I have no idea what led to this brain dropping, but it was not 2:38 a.m., but rather it was about 8:38. And I thought of this. There are certain songs, I think actually what happened is I was at the gym and a song came on shuffle, and it made me think of a movie. Now, there are certain songs that were written specifically for a movie. We mentioned it yesterday. John and I were talking about Back to the Future, and I mentioned I thought Back in Time was a better song than Power of Love. Both of those songs were written for the Back to the Future soundtrack. Danger Zone by Kenny Loggins was specifically written for Top Gun. Goonies Are Good Enough was specifically written for the Goonies. Mrs. Robinson was specifically written for The Graduate, etc. So, and that Mrs. Robinson's a little bit of a gray area, but you get what I'm saying there. That's where it was introduced in the movie itself. And so, having said all that, it led me on Twitter to ask the question of what song that was not written for a movie but was simply placed after it had already been released and was a song well known into a movie then became most synonymous with a movie scene. Now, Moving in Stereo from the Cars is absolutely on the top of the list because of the Phoebe Cates scene. Without a doubt, Good to Be a Gangster by the Ghetto Boys in Office Space is way up there. Peter Gabriel's In Your Eyes from Say Anything is very high on the list. There are a ton of them. People offered some Bohemian Rhapsody and Wayne's World very high on the list. So people offered great suggestions. And one of those is from Goodfellas, and that is the piano of Layla from Eric Clapton and Derek and the Dominos. That led then, when my brain, the way it works, to a second question that I have for you, Eddie, and for our esteemed panel of listeners. Okay. If you are talking about the final 3 minutes, the coda, as sometimes they're called, but the closeout ending of a classic song that like everyone knows. And the ending of a song where the beginning of the song is okay, but you wade through the first 2 minutes of the song because of the anticipation of the fact that you're about to turn up your radio, roll the windows down, sing along, and just allow yourself to go to a place that it takes you to every time you hear it for 3.5 minutes of nostalgic, sometimes melancholic, sometimes blissful joyride. Which of these two songs is the greater close to a song for a repetition of 3 or more minutes? Example A, Eddie, go ahead. That's example A, okay. Or B. We'll go back to A. And then to B here. Come on, man. It's pretty strong, isn't it? Which is the greater close to a song? Those are the two. I mean, that's Boardwalk and Park Place, right? I mean, sure, Bohemian Rhapsody gets into the part where, like, they yell along in Wayne's World. Yes, November Rain goes into, like, the long thing of don't you think that you need somebody and all that. And sure, you know, Frampton Comes Alive, both of those. I mean, Show Me the Way, and, you know, both of those are pretty solid. But in terms of, like, you just got to turn it up and close, and the first 2.5 minutes of the song, you're like, yeah, okay, and then boom, it takes you there, and you're like, here we go. I'd like to know for you, Eddie Garrison, who did not even know of Hey Jude until like 6 months ago, which of those two do you favor?
I probably lean towards Hey Jude.
Really?
Yeah.
Layla's solid, though. I mean, come on. Like,
It is solid, but the Hey Jude just puts you in a
you got
good
Allman
mood,
in
you
the
know?
background on the guitar, the piano going there, the slide. I mean, I don't know. It's solid, man. But I love the fact, Eddie, that I've influenced you into Hey Jude because you were now. What are you doing over there? You're writing out a book. What are you doing?
I'm doing research.
Oh, you're researching.
I'm doing some research here.
Is this research for Stephen Holder because he's going to come up and he's going to talk about a smokescreen that's happening on West 56th?
It's some research about Indiana.
About the Hoosiers?
Yeah.
Are you wanting to know something about one of their national championship teams? Because I can probably answer the research question. Would you like to know the starting lineup of the 87 team, the 93 team, the 02 team?
No.
Would you like to know who they defeated in their run to the Final Four in 02?
No, I'm looking
Seems like
at
forever ago, I realize.
I'm looking at teams that played the back-to-back road trip West Coast
Are you talking
against
about the
Washington,
Pacers, not
Oregon.
the Hoosiers?
No.
Oh, okay.
The Hoosiers. I'm looking at teams in the Big Ten Conference that have gone out west, played back-to-back games against Washington and Oregon, and then they return home after that trip to see how they do, looking at the records and whatever.
And where do things stand so far?
I've got a couple more to look into, but right now it's about 50-50.
By the way, and this is one of the that trip people up. Hey, Jake, what about Survivor, Eye of the Tiger? Again, as I said, songs that were not written for the movie. Eye of the Tiger was written for the movie. It's the eye of the tiger, the thrill of the fight. Remember, Apollo says to Rocky, eye of the tiger, Rock, eye of the tiger. So you think Indiana's going to be in trouble after the game against Oregon once they come back against Ohio State?
So that was the thing with Purdue earlier in the year that I believe Brian Newbert wrote something about it for goldenblack.com about the struggles of haven't been East Coast going to West Coast or West Coast going to East Coast, although that has been the case with UCLA. I think they only have one road win this season, maybe two in conference play. But I was looking into it now because I was curious of what the records were of teams that travel out west to come back to the East, simply because if Indiana loses against Oregon tonight, that means it's probably a must-win game for them against Ohio State to make sure they're a lock for the tournament, and they don't have to go out and win a couple of games in the Big Ten tournament to move out of like a bubble team that's in the Final Four in a playing game to solidly in the field. So Purdue actually is one of two teams that only had 2 days off between their West Coast trip and then returning home to play. Purdue had that loss against Ohio State, and then Illinois just did it recently, but they won, or not recently, they did it before Purdue. They did it at the start of 2025. They had 2 days off between their game against Oregon and their game against Penn State, and they won by like 40. So really, it's all over the place. It's 50-50, though. Teams are 4-2, so sample size is still small.
So if you're good, you're okay.
Yes.
Fair enough.
Nebraska lost, or Northwestern lost to Nebraska when Northwestern came home from the West Coast trip, and then Purdue. Those were the two losses.
Freebird's a good one, man, in terms of closing out.
This will be the third time for Ohio State they're playing a team coming back from the West Coast.
And yet they still suck, right? Man, Freebird's a good one from Jared. It's hard to argue. Hard to argue that. Stephen Holder. I think there might be some funny business going on West 56 with the Colts. I'm going to ask him about it next. 1 o'clock hour is underway in Indianapolis. For that matter, the 1 o'clock hour is underway everywhere in the Eastern time zone. My name is Jake Query, Eddie Garrison, the other voice you hear on this program. Talking about songs with awesome endings to them. I am a little bit embarrassed that I didn't think of Freebird because that is way up there. Hey, Jake, was In the Air Tonight written for Risky Business? It was not. But it is also known for The Hangover, which is the one thing, because that's way up there. Risky Business, though, you could also make the argument more known for Old Time Rock and Roll. Or not Old Time Rock and Roll. Bob Seger. Yeah, Old Time Rock and Roll, right? So, the scene of Tom Cruise sliding across with the candlestick. Joining us now, and I'm sure thrilled to be doing so based on that segue, he is, of course, with ESPN.com. He joins us on the always busy and available for your company to sponsor guest line. Stephen, my understanding is when it comes to the Combine, there have been years past where, and maybe we are a little bit jaded because the Colts were not a prevalent storyline of this year's draft like they have been in years past. But to me, it seems like the biggest storyline that came out of the Combine this year was a couple of media guys getting in a fight at Starbucks. Is that right?
Probably so. I can tell you, among me and my colleagues, it was definitely the biggest topic. The Combine's the dirty little secret is the Combine's kind of boring, right? Like there's stuff happening. It's very important. Conversations are happening. It is very important to what is going to happen in the next few weeks and certainly in the draft. But the dirty little secret is it's not that interesting, I think, if you're not truly invested in some way. So this was great for us. It was like, I don't care whose side you're on, or I don't have a side. I don't even care. It was just great entertainment. So I thoroughly appreciated it. Yes.
Okay, so, and just so we know, and you don't necessarily have to say names, but your understanding is that there are, and let me give you my understanding, and then I want you to tell me or set the record straight of what you heard or may have witnessed, okay? But it's come to my attention. Two media guys that cover the NFL, one of which I think had something on the X post Twitter, and then the other one thought that like it was wrong, or they got in a fight over the last, straw mixer at Starbucks or something, and then that led to a shouting match back and forth. I don't know if there was profanity, no fisticuffs, but very tense moments for all involved. Is that right?
That is my understanding of it. ESPN, my ESPN colleagues, being the great news gatherers that they are, a couple of them did witness it and then detailed or gave great detail on what happened. So yes, I'm glad to say that their news instincts kicked in and they were able to document this very historic event. Yes.
What was the source of this angst? Do we know? Just lack of sleep?
It did. My understanding is, yes, it did stem from, I guess, their respective versions of a story. I believe it had to do with the Matt Stafford and Tom Brady meeting and the characterization of that, or whether there was a meeting and under what circumstances and what have you, in effect, linking Stafford to the Raiders, which of course, did not ultimately happen. He went back to LA. He's doing a new contract. It had to do with maybe what one party was saying about the other party to other colleagues and so forth. And I don't know. It was all very silly, it sounds like.
Well, I believe that the word tampering was used, and then there was debate over whether or not the Raiders could have been tampering via
Right.
Tom Brady with Matthew Stafford, considering the Rams had given Stafford permission to see other people, right?
Right. And I guess there was some debate on how it was characterized. And so if you're characterizing it differently from someone else, someone has to be wrong, right? I guess I think the basic facts, I think, were the same, if I understand correctly, and I didn't dig that deep, to be clear. But I think the basic facts were the same in terms of the respective reports, but the characterizations were different. And so that does matter to us, right, as journalists, and it should matter to everyone, but it matters more to us, I guess. So, again, all kind of silly, but, hey, they can do them. I'll do me.
Stephen, let me give you kind of an observation that I have and a summary that I've concluded towards, and that I want you to talk me away from that and tell me why I'm wrong, or if you can't do that and you say, no, that's actually correct, just tell me. But the Colts during the Combine, the 2025 Colts Combine storyline is the fact that for the first time, really, they came out and said, Anthony Richardson the keys are not necessarily cemented to his hand. We are going to open this up for competition and make it an open and fair quarterbacking competition. Great, right? All right, let's go.
Right.
And then some of the names that have been linked: Daniel Jones, Jacoby Brissett, Justin Fields. It made me, and I get it. I mean, there are not a lot of quarterbacks available out there, but it made me start to believe that they're saying this in principle, and they are preparing us for the possibility that they're going to go in another direction. But in reality, it's all a smokescreen window dressing, because they, quite frankly, don't have the cojones to actually do it and go away from a guy they selected 4th overall 36 months ago. Your thoughts?
Okay, so I think you're onto something to a great degree here. I take a little bit of a different position on some of that, and here's what I think. I do agree that I'm not saying it's much ado about nothing, but it's kind of much ado about nothing potentially here. And I say that because there's not some great quarterback option waiting in the wings here. And you just laid that out, right? I mean, what are they even going to get? Who are they even going to get? I mean, honestly, let's be honest. The idea of Justin Fields sounds good, but Justin Fields might have options out there. Who's to say he wants to come here? Who's to say this would be his best option? And that's why you're hearing about the likes of Daniel Jones, which is what I thought they were in the ballpark for to begin with. You know, I didn't quite buy that this would be some great landing spot, because A, are they really going to go out there and throw around a gazillion dollars for a quarterback? They're not going to do that, because I don't know that makes sense right now. And then, as you laid out, they are heavily invested in Anthony Richardson. They did use the 4th overall pick. Maybe they think he's terrible. I don't know, but that remains true. They spent a very valuable pick on him, and if you're walking away from that after 2 years, it is to a degree, a reflection on you, the people who picked him. So I'll say it again. I've said it on every other show. It is in everyone's best interest for Anthony Richardson to be the quarterback in 2025. It's in Anthony's interest. It's in the interest of Chris Ballard, Shane Steichen, because he was the guy hired to tutor the quarterback that they would pick. All of these people are heavily invested in this working out. So I do think that's the most likely scenario, is that Anthony is the quarterback. And if he's not, that tells us that whoever they brought in, who is not going to be a top-tier quarterback, it tells us that person was better, which tells us that the team probably didn't go anywhere, because you're not going to have a high-level quarterback. I mean, look at last year. I'll shut up after this, but look at last year. Joe Flacco, granted, Joe Flacco's in the twilight of his career, if he even plays again. But there were times last year when many people thought Joe Flacco was the better option. He got in there and he played. I don't think that was ultimately true, right? And so my point to you is, it's not going to change the outcome considerably, because the quarterback they get, if it's not Anthony Richardson starting, that quarterback is unlikely to be so superior that it changes the fortunes of their team single-handedly. That would happen based upon other moves that they make, perhaps. But the quarterback is unlikely to be a guy who's going to change their fortunes, and therefore this is kind of much ado about nothing in my view.
Stephen, doesn't it feel like – Stephen Holder is our guest, ESPN.com, where you can read his work when he's also frequently on this radio station, fortunately for us as well. Doesn't it feel like, to an extent, the Colts have to window dressing this and pretend like they're going to have an open quarterbacking competition just to up the value of who they might be able to get? Because if everybody knows you're coming in to again be the guy that gets in for spot minutes in the event that Anthony Richardson has 3 or 4 game stretches where he can't play, and then you go right back to the sidelines again, Nobody's going to sign up for that, right? Don't you have to kind of entice people into believing that this is an open competition and they have a chance to be a starter in the league?
I do think it's fair to argue that is one of the factors here. That might be one of the motivations for how they've handled this. You're not the first person to present that to me, and I actually don't think that's a crazy theory. I mean, you do have to, if you're going to go out there and make overtures to players, you have to convince them that this is a destination that could work out for them. If you're unlikely to win the quarterback job, then that's not going to be very enticing for a quarterback who wants to start. So I don't disagree with that. I think there's something to that. And look, the previous time we talked to Chris Ballard at the end of the season, he definitely framed this very differently. I think the framing was, look, Anthony gets hurt a lot. He needs somebody to push him. We're going to sign some competition. Here it was completely a different framing. It was, he gets hurt a lot. We need somebody to push him. Oh, and by the way, this is a completely open job. May the best man win. That is a completely different characterization than we got back in January. And so why did it change? Maybe it's because of what you said, or at least in part. Now we have some sense of what the quarterback landscape looks like, and it doesn't look great for them. So that would be one explanation for why they take this approach.
Stephen, I told the story yesterday on the air. Leon's Tailoring, which has been around for 120 years in Indy, it was an institution. It was important to me because I'm from Indianapolis, and it's been around forever. The guy that currently, the most recent owner in the family business is a high school classmate of my mom's. They closed. They're retiring. They're out of the business. So I went in on Sunday all excited because I was like, I'm going to get a sport coat from Leon's Tailoring because it's Indianapolis, and I want that label, even though I never wear sport coats. You do have to wear sport coats a lot. You're in TV. You do all that. What's the most you've ever paid for a sport coat?
Oh, let me tell you, not much, man. I will tell you, I am an off-the-rack guy.
Okay.
I buy it off the rack, and we'll figure it out later. That's me. I am like that with everything. I like nice stuff, or at least stuff that appears to be nice stuff. I do. However, I am not willing to pay the price of nice stuff. So I'm telling you, I have worn suits, and forget about sport jacket. I've worn suits that I couldn't even keep up with the number of compliments I got on it. And,
right.
And the truth of the matter is I paid like $200 for this.
Okay.
Thing, I mean, I'm telling you.
So I've told this story before, and it's a terrible.
Does that make me Chris Ballard, by the way?
What's that?
Chris Ballard. I said, does that make me Chris Ballard? I shop on the clearance rack. I don't know.
No, here's the thing. No, Chris Ballard doesn't shop. He just window shops, right?
Fair.
Is this the year that Chris Ballard? Now, I will tell you, the suit same thing. The suit that I get the most compliments on is one that I had to buy because they lost my luggage, and I was covering a news story in Florida and had to go to Walmart at like 4 o'clock in the morning because I had to be on the air for a morning show, and there was nowhere else to go. And literally people are like, that suit is beautiful. So I understood there. The sport coat that I tried on was on sale, mind you, okay, off the rack, on sale, and I liked it. It looked nice, and I was ready to pull the trigger, and then I looked at the sleeve, and it was $895.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. So
right.
Chris Ballard, though, we know this. If he is going to, in fact, shop, he's not going to bargain shop. Now, he's got the money to go ahead and go through it right now. Does he feel urgency because of, whatever it may be, because of the fact that they have cap space? They're, for example, defensive back. There may be some good defensive backs that are available now in the market that are going to be cap casualties elsewhere. Is this the year that he does strategically? And I'm not talking about, wheeling and dealing and going out and just getting Ricky Jean-Francois and Gosder Sherless and Laron Landry because you can. I'm talking about strategically and in a smart fashion, spending money to upgrade roster. Is the time now?
I think it's the most likely time for him to do it. I'm still not all the way there. I don't think it's in his nature. I think he's going to break out in hives when it comes time, to put pen to paper. So I don't know. I guess is what I'm saying. I want to see it. I have to see it to believe it. I do think that they'll be involved and they'll be in a lot of conversations. Do they close the deal? I don't know. It's kind of like me. I'm the guy who puts stuff in the online shopping cart and lets it sit there and has to like be convinced that this is worth the money. Do I actually want to pull the trigger on this? And then by the time I decide, that size is already gone, right? I'm that guy. So Chris Ballard has been that guy too. And I guess the question is, can he bring himself to be somebody else? It's a very fair question, right? I mean, I don't know that answer. But I would say this, just to continue our previous conversation about, you buying the suit at Walmart, et cetera, and my cheap ways, despite wanting to look very good. Look, the clothes don't make the man is what that tells me. Look, I mean, you wore the hell out of that suit, and it didn't matter where it came from. So, kudos to you. One last quick story. I know you didn't ask for this, but I got to share. And you can identify with this. My wife somehow, for some reason, bought me 2 Christmases ago a Hugo Boss outfit for Christmas from like Nordstrom. I mean, and it didn't fit, so I had to take this thing back, right? And I go there, and then I find out how much the damn thing costs. My first question was, "Hey, are you crazy?" And then the second question was, "Okay, well now I'm really going shopping. Give me my store credit, and I'm going to buy a whole bunch of stuff." And I did, and I came back with a whole bag full of stuff, and I was like, "You're terrible at this, but thanks."
No, was she offended, though? I always feel bad because that means that she went in there and thought this is something, like she saw that. And, your wife, Stephen, went to the store, and she said to herself, I don't care about the label. When I see that, that reminds me of my beloved Stephen. And the fact that each and every time that he's going to wear that suit, I'm going to think of that as being the ultimate symbol of the fact that I was thinking of him, and he's wearing it to know that I was thinking of him, and what a sign of the bond between the two of us. And then you immediately went and said you're terrible and turned it into a bunch of cologne. That's how I see that.
Okay, that's one way to look at it.
I shouldn't say that. That's not condemning you. Unfortunately, that's the way that like I think, and then I'm guilt-ridden. Right. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, that's one way. The other way, or my preferred way to look at it is, look, I now can wear different things like 3 or 4 times, and all of them link back to her, right? They all lead back to her and her first initiation of all of this by buying that very, very expensive outfit that didn't fit. So anyway, I have no idea how we got there, but
here's my last question on that before I ask you if the Colts are going to have an interest, for example, in Darius Slay, who may have something left in the tank and is a position of need for them. Before we get to that, here's the other question. Shannon's father had multiple custom-made suits made for him, but then retired from his position before the suits were actually completed and being made. So he said to me, you can actually have these suits. You just have to have them altered to you. So I did, because they were like super elaborate and beautiful suits. I've never worn any of them, but they now are altered to me. Can I say those are custom-made suits, yes or no?
Oh, I mean, they are custom-made suits. Whether they were custom-made for you is a different story. Who cares?
Yeah. I mean, that –
roll with it.
Well, listen, you had a custom-made Hugo Boss sentiment, and you just turned around and dispatched of that. Okay, Darius Slay is obviously being let go, I would assume salary cap casualty in Philly. Does he have enough left in the tank? Is that the kind of player Chris Ballard could look towards? Well,
just for the record, real quick, the clearance rack at Nordstrom is still not cheap. But anyway,
correct. Nor is it at Leon's.
Actually, I don't hate the idea of taking a look at Darius Slay. I don't know what the money looks like. That would be my question. I don't think it can go crazy. But, look, I look back at the Stephon Gilmore signing of, what was that, maybe 3 years ago. That made a lot of sense. I thought that was very effective. He had a great season despite the terrible overall performance of the team. And I thought he was around, I think, the same age at that time. So as Darius Slay. So, there are guys that can do it. And as long as you are before that point where the big drop off comes, because I firmly believe, like older players, there's a steep drop off that happens pretty quickly. That's hard to sometimes forecast. So if you can get in there before that big drop off, then it's a good deal. So I'd like to at least know what the money looks like, and it might be worth looking at.
And, man, you know what? That position, Stephen, defensive backfield, has the biggest roll of the dice on that time. For example, I think of, Vontae Davis, and maybe that might have been more like mental than physical. Cromartie, when Cromartie came here, and you want to talk about going and exchanging suits when the Colts were overseas and he went to Paris overnight to go shopping, but he was washed up, right? But then there are other guys. Woodson and Champ Bailey are two guys that come to mind to me that we thought they were washed up two different times before they finally were. I think that's the hardest position to gauge it. But anyway, upcoming on ESPN.com, Stephen Holder for your Colts coverage. The next, I guess, thing that you're looking for, or the next thing that we should be anticipating in terms of your coverage.
Well, I'll look back at the quarterback situation, and I have some thoughts on that, some of which I shared with you today. But just really like I think it's a complex thing, like what they're trying to do here. Their attempt to navigate this is very complicated, I think, more so than they are portraying. So anyway, I'm looking at that. And then next week around this time, it'll be busy. So we'll see how busy it is for the Colts in terms of free agent conversation.
All right, Stephen, we appreciate it, and we will be watching for all the coverage. Appreciate it.
All right, you got it.
All right, there he is, the sharp-dressed man, Stephen Holder, joining us on the guest line. Eddie Garrison was doing a bunch of number crunching. I mean, he looked like an accountant over here. He looked like he had the adding machine out, and he was punching, and he had paper over his ears and a pencil. I mean, he was just getting busy with all kinds of numbers. And does that mean tonight, Advantage Local School out west? We will explain and get his numbers breakdown next. People have asked, because of our topic earlier about songs that were placed into movies, not written for, but placed into movies that then became synonymous with a particular scene in the movie. And several people have asked if this song from Simple Minds was written specifically for The Breakfast Club. It was written and composed by the record producer Keith Bosey and guitarist for the film The Breakfast Club. So, yes, it was written for the movie, so that does not count. But it's a great, great, great song, no question. It also, by the way, is in, I thought, the greatest Super Bowl commercial that I've seen, and I'm probably the only person that remembers this commercial, but there was a Super Bowl commercial where, am I going to say this right? Animatronic, is that the right terminology? An animatronic animal at like a popular pizza place in the 80s. And then the pizza place eventually just kind of faded out, went out of business, and the little robot thing was purchased, and it shows like this like terribly sad journey of this thing. And then in the end, he was able via virtual reality, I think it was Google, put on the image and get together with the friends that were formerly in that band at the pizza place, kind of rip off of Showbiz Pizza. And that song plays, and they all play, and it was like a tear-jerking commercial. At any rate, Eddie Garrison has put together, we were talking earlier, Indiana in action tonight. Purdue is in action tonight taking on Rutgers. The Hoosiers of Indiana are in Oregon to take on the Ducks out in Eugene, and then they come back and they take on Ohio State. As it stands right now, Indiana is, according to the bracketology, which is usually pretty on par, Mike Woodson's group is listed as amongst the last four that would not have to even play in the play-in game. They have now worked their way even out of that into the spot where they would be an 11 seed with a guaranteed first-round game and not an entry round game or whatever they call them now in the NCAA tournament. Ohio State would be listed as one that I think that would have to go into a play-in situation. Having said that, Eddie, the concern for Indiana would be when they come back to take on Ohio State that they're coming from that two-step out west of that Oregon-Washington duo. And one would think that that means what we might see for the Houston Rockets tonight, some sort of a fatigue. But you're telling me that the numbers say a little bit differently.
So right now, I've only been able to compile teams that have played Oregon in the second game of the West Coast trip thus far. I haven't looked too much into the Washington aspect of this just yet, but let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams have done the West Coast trip where they played Washington first, and then they played Oregon in the second game. Rutgers, Northwestern, Nebraska, Purdue, Maryland, and Illinois. The two teams that have lost were Purdue and Northwestern. Purdue had 2 games off between playing Oregon and Ohio State. They were leading Ohio State in the first half, and then the wheels kind of fell off in the second half, and they ended up losing that game. Northwestern had 4 days off between when they played Oregon and when they played Nebraska, and they still lost. So right now, it doesn't seem like it's too much of a factor.
Yeah, but now the other teams, a lot of that you look at, for example, you would assume, I mean, a Nebraska-Northwestern game is probably a coin flip game anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
Purdue certainly should have beaten Ohio State at home. So, maybe that is a factor there, right?
Yes.
It'll be interesting, though, because Indiana's, I'll use the term rise for lack of a better phrase, but Indiana's progression here in the NCAA tournament and getting invited into the tournament and getting themselves to the, pushing through a few people here where it's like, oh, man, they look like they're in pretty good shape. That seemingly is as much about what Indiana's done and as much as it is what other teams have not done. Because even though Indiana, I think the win in Washington is impressive, but Washington's not any good. But it is still a quad 1 level win on the road. It's a conference game. You're away from home. The Michigan State game really helps Indiana. I mean, that's one that really, really helps them. And, they also, the tournament, you have to look at the fact that when Indiana had their slide And believe me, it's a long slide over the year, right? But when Indiana's had their slide, a lot of that Malik Renew was hurt. And he is now back and playing at a high level, and they're using him in different ways. But, that to be said, it is you if you are the tournament selection committee and you're sitting there and you're looking at the blind draw and they say, okay, here's this team and here's what they've done in the last month, but they're one of their best players. They're second leading scorer, and they're leading, one of their leading rebounders, and upperclassman was out for these games. Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense. Why then now? Now, is that player available on team 74 that we're talking about here? Yes, that player is now available. Okay, then they get benefit of the doubt. That does, I'm sure, come into play with it all.
I'm sure it does too. And I remember back when Indiana was going through that, that losing stretch. And Mike Woodson was like, hey, look, we don't have Malik. Malik's just getting back. And I just kind of brushed it off because I was like, I don't think Malik Renew is the savior at the time of Indiana. But it turns out he's been part of the turnaround for Indiana. The other part is that Mike Woodson has actually started coaching a little bit, Jake. He made some, changes with his starting lineup and his rotations.
Mike Woodson actually has started coaching a little bit.
Yes.
He got the memo, right?
Yeah, he got the memo. Like, as you heard with Don Fisher yesterday, they don't go to the too big lineup much, if at all, anymore.
And that's something we've been talking about all year, right?
Correct. And he finally has put Luke Goody in the starting lineup on a consistent basis.
He's like, I don't know if you know this or not, but in the this year in college basketball, like Wisconsin, Green Bay, they got the memo now, right? They've lost, they got it figured out.
You think so?
Mike Woodson got word. He got the memo. Like, here we go. It's time now, right?
Yeah.
It kind of like when I was in freshman algebra, and in the last 9 weeks, I'm like, I got the memo. I am buckling down now, baby. 29%, I realize, but I'm now, Mr. Stover is going to meet me in the morning and do a couple tutor sessions because I'm taking this bad boy seriously. Kind of the same thing. But it is
Mr. Hand had that conversation with Spicoli.
Yes, same thing. Mr. Jeff Spicoli, as soon as this England place is bogus. And if we don't get some cool rules ourselves, pronto, we'll just be bogus too. Very close, Jeff. So, again, he figured it out, right? Jeff decided to start studying.
Yeah.
But the curious thing to me for Indiana, dare I say, and this sounds crazy. If Indiana, something happened to Indiana that I think is going to prohibit what I'm about to say. And I truly believe this. I think it's unlikely that the following that I'm about to mention happens. But stranger things have happened. How many times do you see in the NCAA tournament, and you do see this, where a team gets in and they get hot and they go on a run, and then the storyline becomes, you hear the commentators saying, like in the regional finals, and 6 weeks ago this team was left for dead. There was talk about there was dissension and they were losing, and now it's all come together, and here they are, and it's this great story.
NC State last year.
Yes. Prime example, right?
Uh-huh.
And it just comes together and boom, they get hot, and then they, kind of like riding a hot goaltender in hockey, and you just go with it. So with that, if Indiana is to have that happen, let's say they get in the tournament, okay? If you look at the bracketology, there's something that could happen for Indiana that precedent tells you is not impossible. But precedent also tells you it's not going to change a thing. And I'll give you the example of both precedents and why I think it answers a huge question about Indiana next. What movie do you think of, Eddie? Any?
No.
We were talking earlier about songs that either have a great ending to them, which this one absolutely does, or songs that make you think of a movie scene. I think a lot of people with that song would think of the scene with Jenny in Forrest Gump when she's up on the balcony ledge in Forrest Gump. Great song.
I thought you were going to drop this was in Shawshank Redemption.
No, although there is a very classic scene in Shawshank that involves an opera song from The Barber of Seville. I think it's from The Barber of Seville, but it's fabulous. And the scene for the 99.8% of the population and anybody not named Eddie Garrison or Jimmy Cook, they know exactly what I'm talking about. We still need to do our Shawshank party, by the way.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so Indiana, if they were to get in and get hot, okay, realistically, it would be a unique and interesting situation. And it makes you wonder. And listen, we're going to go in the world of hypothetical here, okay?
Makes you go,
That's right. The world of make-believe. Let's just say, and stranger things have happened. 30 years ago, I would have said this kind of thing never happens. But, I mean, we've seen George Mason make a Final Four.
That's right.
We've seen South Carolina make a Final Four. That was a decent team, though.
St. Peter's go on a
St. Peter's get to the Elite Eight.
Yeah.
You mentioned NC State a year ago. Good one. You know, UCLA had to go through the play-in game one year and went to the Final Four. So, stranger things have happened. If you look at the NCAA bracketology, which was released today by Joe Lunardi, and yes, obviously, Lunardi, strictly in terms of knowing exactly what seed a team is going to get or where they're going to be seeded and who they're going to be playing in terms of the actual brackets, you know, these are literally fictional. But it gives you an idea because he is very accurate in terms of being able to say these are the 68 teams and where they're going to be. Where they're going to be slotted, I mean, in terms of their seeding. You know, you might be off by 1 or 2 of a seed. I mean, he's got Missouri as a 5 seed. Okay, maybe they're actually a 4 or a 6, but it gives you an idea. But if you were to use hypothetically, and we're going strictly hypothetical, Indiana right now is an 11 seed. And he has them, by the way, as they're on the rise 11 seed. But they open with St. Mary's. Randy Bennett's group in St. Mary's, the Gales. A lot of international players. I've watched them. Pretty good shooters. They're 27-4.
They are tenacious defensively.
Very good team.
They get after it.
But let's say Indiana, because Umar Ballo is familiar with them, and so he knows it, and they go to him a lot, and then Renew spells and gives good minutes, and Indiana pulls the upset and wins. And then you got Kentucky and Utah Valley. Kentucky a 3 seed.
Utah Valley?
Yep. My cousin, by the way, 2-time all-conference performer in softball at Utah Valley, just so you know, which I didn't realize. I think they're in the WAC. So Kentucky wins that game. So Indiana, Kentucky in round number 2. Let's say Indiana pulls the upset there.
Mm-hmm.
Then on the bottom part of that bracket, they would play either Illinois, San Diego State, Iowa State, or Bryant. Yeah, okay. Iowa State, sure. So all this chatter between Iowa State and Indiana in the Sweet 16 about whether or not TJO is Indiana facing their new coach and da-da-da. So Indiana, because of all the chatter and distraction for Iowa State slips on a banana peel. Indiana, boom. Now all of a sudden, they're in the Elite Eight. Auburn, Southern, Creighton, Utah State, Clemson, Nebraska, Purdue, High Point. Those are the teams coming out of the top part of the bracket. Let's just say it's Auburn. No disrespect to Purdue. Indiana goes up in the Elite Eight, and they play Auburn tough, and they lose to Auburn, who goes on to win the national title. Is that enough where people say, you know what? Mike Woodson, once he figured it out, Eddie Garrison said it on the radio, he decided to finally start coaching. Let's go ahead and ride this out. Let's stick with it. Let's go ahead and give Mike Woodson 2 more years, because look at the way they turned things around. And he was right. Mike Woodson was right. Malik Renew was healthy, and they finally got things figured out, and they were a darn good team in March. And we always preach at Indiana that the thing is you want to be better in March than you were in November, and this team was. Let's go with it. Here's why that's not going to happen. Once upon a time, Indiana had a legendary basketball coach they fired.
Really?
It's a huge deal.
Wow.
And literally, it was such a big deal when they fired him.
Archie Miller?
That the Colts had a game that Sunday against the Oakland Raiders, and there was literally like no one to interview Colts players after the game, because every media member that was covering that game, when I say every, I'm speaking in generalities, but a huge percentage of them. But the national people who had been sent to go cover the Colts-Raiders game got pulled from it, because it's like Indiana's holding another press conference about the Bob Knight situation. And at the IUPUI campus, and boom, all these reporters got pulled out of the Colts game and sent there. It was that big a deal. It was the biggest story in sports when Bob Knight was fired. And they elevate Mike Davis and John Treelore, and they say, you guys, one of you guys is going to be the head coach, and it's Mike Davis. So Mike Davis is the head coach on the quote-unquote interim level, and they go in that first year, and they have a good run, and they get in, and they play Kent State in the NCAA tournament, and they get beat in the opening round. But they showed promise. I think that might have been the game where they beat Michigan State, who was ranked number 1. There was enough competency and excitement and balance on the roster, and you had all these players that it's like, well, they maintained and they managed to keep Jared Jeffries, and they managed to keep Dane Fife and A.J. Moye and Jeffrey Newton and George Leach and Tom Coverdale. And look at what he did in opening up Tom Coverdale and letting him go. So Indiana decided to give Mike Davis another year. And then in year 2, you know what happens. They tie for the Big Ten title with like 4 other teams, but they get into the NCAA tournament. They catch lightning in a bottle. They use this pretty good offense that centered around Jerry Jeffries on the high post and just facilitating three-point shooters galore. And they get hot, and they make the national championship game, and they're leading with 6.5 minutes to go in the game. And right then Indiana says, you know what? Whatever it's going to take, we got to get this Mike Davis locked in and signed, sealed, and delivered, and let's get him boom, let's go. And Mike Davis deserves all the credit and all the roses in the world for being put in a position that was the toughest in college basketball and carrying it and going through that, especially in the beginning of it, with an incredible amount of grace, considering the things that now we know he had to go through and the things that he faced, some of which were very ugly. But it also was very obvious shortly thereafter then that Davis wasn't ready yet for that job, both from an X's and O's standpoint and from a fishbowl standpoint. And Indiana realized that it erred in making an emotional, long-term decision on riding the emotion from an immediate moment. And yes, that was a long time ago. It's hard to believe, but that was almost 25 years ago. But many of the powers that be, sure, Miles Brand's not there anymore. Sure, Clarence Donninger's not there anymore. But Scott Dolson was around then, and many of the boosters were around then, and many of the fans that still support Indiana basketball passionately are still around, are around. And so I think that it causes Indiana to say, even if they were to make a deep run, look, we made a decision. We told Mike Woodson he's done at the end of the year. We came to at least on the public surface, an amicable parting, and we're going to stick by that. And we are going to stick by, because we're not going to allow, because especially when you look at Woodson's age, you would be right back in the same position within a few years anyway. They're going to stick by it. There's zero chance, even though it's a fun hypothetical, even if they were to win the national championship, it wouldn't surprise me if it's not enough. Just because everybody would know that it's lightning in a bottle, and what you've learned from the past is that ultimately lightning cracks the bottle, and then all of a sudden you got a bunch of glass shrapnel that can cut you. That's simply the way it works out. Scott Agnes, Pacers and Rockets tonight at the Fieldhouse. Rockets coming off, hopefully, I think they're all right now taking a nap because they got in very, very late. But we'll talk to Scott Agnes about how things look for the Pacers tonight. We'll do it next. Pacers in action tonight. Take it on the Houston Rockets. And Houston's good, but Houston at the same time, and I'm curious about this, because the Rockets last night, I've mentioned this 100 times already, but they're getting in. They got in very late. They were in Oklahoma City last night. I'm assuming, and Scott Adnix can help me do the math here. We looked it up. It's a 1 hour and 52-minute flight of airtime from Oklahoma City to Indianapolis. Now, you got to assume that obviously they're chartering. So, Scott, let's do the math. They played last night in Oklahoma City. That was an 8 o'clock tip in Oklahoma City.
You ready?
That game would have ended around, let's say, 10:30 at night? Are we? Is that a safe guesstimate, Indianapolis time?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Okay, so 10:30. Now, you would know, Scott, you've covered teams, you've been on roads with teams, etc. If they got done at 10:30, they would have been, by the time they changed, do media, whatever else, they would have left the arena in Oklahoma City at about what time?
Probably midnight if you're done at 10:30.
Okay, so midnight.
A good hour and a half.
Midnight Eastern, okay? Then you've got, you basically go straight to the plane, let's say 30 minutes, so 12:30. Now you've got an hour and 52 minutes in the air, so you're landing in Indy at 2:20. You got obviously a charter bus that takes you into the I'm not going to say the name of the hotel, but I think we all know downtown. So you get in about 2:45. You unwind, whatever else. You get to the hotel. You're in there by 3:15 in your room, okay? Look, these are young guys. I get it. But even still, Houston last night, if I'm not mistaken, kind of prepared for it, and a lot of their guys did not play last night in anticipation that they should be pretty close to full go tonight, correct?
Yeah, I was really interested to see, all the guys that any Pacer fans would recognize, from their all-star Alfred Sengun, him being out, Amen Thompson, Terry Eason, Dylan Brooks, Fred VanVleet. That was their group that was out and did not play in that game. So, especially being a younger team, I was surprised to see the level of players that were out. Now, officially, we do know Fred VanVleet is out tonight, but of all those names that I otherwise mentioned, they are not even on the injury report for tonight.
Yeah, VanVleet's had it's been an ankle, right? We all have ankles, but he turned an ankle. He's been out something like 12 of their last 13 games or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so that one's no surprise. But
he's a really important piece for them. He is not a guy that necessarily you look at and you say, that the casual fan would realize. But I think he is a very important kind of senior piston in their engine.
For sure. Yeah, he was the older player that Houston brought in to help with a young core. This has been a very young Rockets roster, and they've been hesitant to make any kind of moves that might negatively impact their direction. But he's the guy that they paid at like age 29 and trying to help them get the wheels in motion towards moving forward. And now they're one of the more formidable teams in the Western Conference.
Okay, let's go to the Indiana side of things before we get kind of into the X's and O's of this game, Scott. First, Jarris Walker playing in the G League. Rick Carlisle told the guys this morning on the morning show this was not where they went to Jarris Walker and asked him to go, but rather he was totally cool with it. In other words, they didn't have to pull his arm. He wants to get reps, and he played well. I said yesterday, Indiana designating Jarris Walker for G League minutes, there are two ways to look at that. One would be that means that they've turned the page. The other would be that means they totally believe in him and want to make sure that they're not letting cobwebs settle in on something where they started to see a turn of the corner. Your thoughts?
I think it was, first of all, awesome that Jarris is willing to do it. He does not have to do it, especially being a lottery pick. Some could take it the wrong way, but the reality is he's not getting regular minutes, and so the biggest confidence boost on top of finding your game rhythm, getting in game shape again for a guy that even when he does play might be like 5 minutes, 7 minutes, and you can't replicate it during practice. And now, as most people probably recognize, once you turn like the corner halfway through the year, you're not practicing very often, and when you do, it's like walkthroughs breakthroughs and shooting. And so if I'm Jarris, who eagerly wants to get in the lineup, there's nothing better than for him to do the G League, although we have seen players in the past that are not willing to do this. So I give him a lot of credit. And then on top of that, he clearly took it seriously. He recorded that triple-double, and they had a big win. So I think it's all good things all around, considering their circumstances. He wants to play. They want him to play. And that's the one really good positive about having a G League team that plays right here.
Scott, in your opinion, your observation, what's been the difference in the last month for Tyrese Halliburton?
Rest. It's as simple as that to me, especially. I mean, having the All-Star break where he had 5 days to not only do nothing but not think about anything. There's just been so much in his life in the last 2 weeks. Now, he's coming off a birthday party a couple days ago, so keep that in mind for tonight. But otherwise, this is a guy that's just had so much from the sudden trade that when he first got here to being crowned the face of the franchise before you had even reached a significant playoff series, to now the highest contract in franchise history, to now forced to be in a leader, and then you're schemed upon. And that's the big thing we've seen this year is a lot of teams are trying to eliminate him from the equation, whether it's full court or double teaming him. And that's asked a lot more of Nembhard. So I go with rest more than anything. And that also allows for any injuries to be a little bit restful coming off his Team USA workload there. And then I think just having healthier teammates, right? Having Nembhard in the backcourt in December, having Nesmith join him in January, having that continuity allows for everybody else to star in their role, and I think everybody is doing that right now.
What all was involved in his birthday party? Do you know?
No, I do not. No.
You know, Ron Artest
I don't get invited to those.
Ron Artest once asked me if I would be willing to bring him along if I went to any birthday parties. And I thought, well, sure. It's been a while since I've been to a birthday party, but okay, you know what I mean? Maybe that's more what he had in mind, right? My other question is this. Tyrese Halliburton is a leap year baby, meaning he was born on his birthday is February 29th, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so he only gets to celebrate that technically every 4 years. If your birthday was February 29th, on the other 3 years out of the non-leap year years, would you celebrate it on the 28th or March 1st?
I'm doing March 1st because 28th is always there. So that is not officially your birthday. So whatever day is after the 28th. So that would be March 1st.
I would tend to agree with you on that. But I don't know, though, man. Like, I think there are a lot of people that would go ahead and take it the day early, right?
Here's the other way to think about it. Depends what day of the week it falls on. That's how you decide. That'd be another way to go about it. If one's a Wednesday and one's a Thursday, like that's a no-brainer. You're doing the Thursday.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, here's the thing.
The other argument is you do both because you have that excuse.
Okay, I think you and I had this discussion once, Scott, maybe even on the air. It is my opinion that after the age of 21, 25 is kind of cool, but certainly after 30, you have your 40th, your 50th, your 60th, and maybe your 75th. After that, the rest of them, nobody cares. You do, but nobody else does. Your 37th birthday, nobody cares.
Right. Totally agree.
43rd birthday, nobody cares. Be an adult. That's all.
Entirely agree. I laugh at the people that celebrate for a month. It's like, what's going on? Oh, it's just extending my birthday. I turned 28.
Yeah,
okay.
Mean, come on.
Again, it goes back to having an excuse, right? We talk about, which day does Ty celebrate? Well, which day do you want a good excuse to celebrate?
My entire life is my birthday, right?
Ooh, you're squeezing the juice every day. I get it.
You got to do what you got to do, right? I think Halliburton, when Halliburton is in that mode where, and we've seen it, his assist to turnover right now is nearly 11.5 to 1 since the All-Star break. He is in that mode. When Halliburton is getting offensively, all of a sudden he gets in the zone in terms of like shooting from the outside, he is able to do that kind of I don't even know how to describe it, the hook shot pass, if you will, when he drives in and then facilitates. The player who most benefits from in-zone Ty Halliburton is who?
First guy that comes to mind when Ty is clicking is an Obi Toppin because there's going to be a couple alley-oops. Another one be Aaron Nesmith, who's got to be ready in the corner to knock down a three-pointer. when he's flowing like that. But to your point, I do want to illustrate, like, the one big thing that we had missed from Tyrese, I thought, was those assist numbers. He had done very well from the point total for the most part. There was consistency issues. But then the steals is the other thing that stands out to me. After 14 consecutive games of single-digit assists, he's done it now for 5 straight games. And alongside that, Jake, he's had at least 3 steals in every one of those games. So it's the multi-dimensional level that stands out most to me about his performances.
Now, Scott, I want to get to the burning topic of the other day in that game on Sunday against, and I'm trying to think, was it Toronto? They
Chicago on Sunday.
Chicago, that's right, Chicago.
It was Boomer's birthday. Come on.
Okay, so that's the thing. That's I want to get to this. That's where I was going with this. Okay, so the Boomer's birthday game is always awesome, right? And it's totally fun and whatever else. Here's the rundown of mascots that we got this year. And for those that are unfamiliar, for Boomer's birthday, they bring in mascots from the other NBA teams that come together for this. This year we got Blaze, and that's the mascot for the Portland Trail Blazers, okay? He is kind of like, I think he's a cougar, a mountain lion of some sort, and he's got a little necklace on and whatever else. He was
some kind of cat. Some kind of cat, like Boomer.
I think you're right, yeah. He was fun, right? He was fun. Okay, then we had Crunch, who is the Timberwolf. Relatively new to the scene, for me at least. I mean, I'm sure he's been around forever. I was relatively unfamiliar with his work. Seemed okay. Seemed like a nice enough guy, and also knew the role, understood that it was Boomer's day, right? Fine. Crunch gets a passing grade. So too does Blaze. Then the bottom really drops off here. We get Pierre the Pelican. Now, he's okay, but, I mean, he doesn't have arms. He's got wings. Okay. And then in this, Scott, I have a real Hugo the Hornet. I mean, is that the worst mascot in the NBA, Hugo the Hornet?
It's very it's very not unthinkable, but just bland. Like, no one thinks of the Hornets, no one thinks of that mascot.
Here's
mediocre.
Have you seen Hugo the Hornet by chance?
Not lately.
Okay.
No.
Hugo the Hornet, let me give you the rundown. It almost felt to me like there was a problem flying wise. You know, maybe they booked him on a bad airline, and so Hugo couldn't make it. And then they're like, well, we've got to get somebody to be Hugo the Hornet. And they went to Meyer and bought teal tights and then a tutu, like a tutu of some sort, and high tops, and then just some sort of like purple mock turtleneck. And they're like, okay, here you go.
Oh my gosh, Jake, look up the Kings mascot, Slamson the Lion.
Okay. Now,
the worst is the Pelicans when they use that the doll,
King Crab
the baby doll.
Is not. Are you talking about the King Crab baby?
Yes, awful. Get rid of it immediately.
Yeah, they did get rid of him. Didn't they replace him with Pierre?
I feel like I've still seen it on social media and such.
See,
I don't know
cool
if
with Slamson the Lion. I'm okay with that. He's just a lion that, I mean, he's fine looking, right? What beef do you have, Eddie, with Slamson the Lion?
Well, the picture that I saw, you could see like the eyes of the human and the cutout.
Well, okay. So they might have skimped a little bit on actually, but Slamson looks okay. Yeah, I mean, he's fine. I don't know how long he's been around, but he's listed as, I like this, Slamson the Lion. Description, lion. Yeah, you think? That's why he's called Slamson the Lion. He's in the Mascot Hall of Fame. Slamson the Lion.
I don't think that Mascot Hall of Fame exists anymore, by the way.
Excuse me?
I'm pretty sure they had to get rid of that Mascot Hall of Fame, the one in Indiana.
Wait, I think you're right on that. What do you mean they had to?
I don't know, finances, or wasn't successful. Or I don't know the details here. I just don't think it exists anymore. I'm just surprised it's taken this long for you to bring up that Little Freddie was in the house, because that's usually the biggest hit, especially around Caitlin.
I mean, Little
Caitlin
Freddie was
Clark
cool.
Loves
and
Little Freddie.
Little Freddie was cool, and obviously, Little Boomer's cool. Now, let me read to you the 2024 Mascot Hall of Fame inductee list. Okay, you got Big Al from the University of Alabama. This one's a little bit uncomfortable, but I'll say it anyway. Big Joe, not of radio fame, but the Ottawa Red Blacks. Big Lug, again, not the brewing folks who I love, but the Lansing Lugnuts. Biscuit the Bulldog. Blitz from the Seattle Seahawks. Bernie from the Miami Heat, Dibbs from DePaul, and Jackson DeVille. Jackson DeVille properly in the Hall of Fame. Purdue Pete went in this year. So that was 2024. Please tell me that it's still around. If I find out that this thing is closed and I didn't get a chance to go to it, I'm going to be outraged. This is an automatic road trip. Anyway.
Mascot Hall of Fame in Northwest Indiana to close. This is a story back in July of last year.
Okay, does it say when their last day was? Because I went to Leon's
Closed
tailoring for their
September
last day.
14th of last year.
Good Lord. Anything else you want to crush my hopes and dreams about, Scott?
No.
Okay, last
no.
question for you, Scott. I'm asking everybody this that we've had on the show. I went to Leon's Tailoring on Saturday. Had to buy myself an article of clothing because they're closing. Put on a sport coat, loved it. It was super nice. Looked at the price tag, and I mean, look, it is top of the line fashion stuff at Leon's Tailoring. What's the most you've ever spent on a sport coat?
$350.
Okay. Yeah.
What about you?
That's probably somewhere in that ballpark, I guess, somewhere in there. This particular coat that I tried on, it was just the sport coat, not the suit. It was really nice. It was $895.
Yeah,
I said,
believe it.
I said, well, I've got a 20. And they said, no, $895. I said, no, okay, no thanks. Okay, Scott. Lastly, we're looking for what tonight? I mean, obviously, this game with Houston, Indiana, then having to go on the road for 2 in Atlanta, and then Chicago before they come home. Health-wise, etc. Looks like, I mean, obviously good to go here, right?
Yeah, you just have Benedict Mathurin's on the injury report. Hadn't played in the last 2. He's listed as doubtful, so that suggests highly unlikely for him to go. You got a shorthanded Houston team, obviously, that you referenced in terms of when they got into town, clearly after midnight. You got good guard play, and that's something to keep in mind here. I think that the Pacers' backcourt has benefited from weaker guard play that they've gone against in the last several days. That's something I'm keeping in mind here. Segun inside, he's really solid. And this is a really good Western Conference team that has fared very well with the rest of the league. So this is going to be a good challenge that I think further demonstrates the level in which the Pacers are at right now.
What kind of overhead could the Mascot Hall of Fame have had? Like
lack of visitors?
No, but what cost? Power bill? Okay, sure, whatever. I mean, you're telling me Orbit from the Houston Astros can't occasionally pipe in a couple bucks? I mean, he played in Enron Field, for crying out loud.
Could be like Major League Baseball, lack of marketing.
Yeah, no kidding, right? I can't believe the
You're
Mascot
proof of
Hall
that.
of Fame
You would
closed.
have went up there.
Oh, man, that is the biggest buzzkill ever. All right, Scott, appreciate the time.
Okay.
Pacers, Rockets tonight. We'll talk to you soon. Scott Agnes joining us on the program. Eddie's got to bail out of here a little bit early, but you mentioned Major League Baseball, Eddie. Have you been watching spring training?
I watched some spring training last night.
And you watched who last night? You got super excited when I just asked that.
Yeah, the Reds. Duh. Come on.
You follow baseball pretty closely.
I do.
Is there anything in spring training that one can truly learn?
Not really. It's just nice to be able to watch baseball. I mean, you can see what guys are trying to work on and how from like this offseason and what they're trying to improve upon. Like, for example, with the Reds, Ellie De La Cruz has a new stance. Like, he changed his stance up to, I guess, to allow him to be to raise his batting average a little bit and minimize the number of strikeouts.
De La Cruz, in your opinion, is a top what player?
Ooh. Right now? Top 50? Top 40?
When he first came into the league, you anticipated he was going to be a what top player?
Top 10?
Yeah. Like, has water found its level a little bit with him?
No. Not yet. I still think he's got mountains to grow.
So you think he can still be top 10?
Oh, yeah, he can win MVP. I
Okay.
think he's got that kind of upside.
The team that is forecasted to be really bad that you think could surprise people this year? Because, you follow it pretty closely, and you're usually pretty on par with this.
Well, it did not work out for me last year. With the beer bet, remember
Yeah,
that?
you overthought it, yep.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I'd have to look at who's projected to be bad. Like, Miami will be bad.
Okay, I'm going to read for you.
I think it's always St. Louis for some reason. Everyone is
I
super
know.
down on
I
St.
know.
Louis, and like it's St. Louis. They'll somehow find ways.
Here
to
are the
win
teams,
games.
Eddie. Here are the teams with low over-unders, okay? So hear me out, because there are a handful of them here. The A's at 71.5, the White Sox at 53.5, the Rockies at 58.5, the Angels at 71.5, Marlins at 63.5, Nationals 72.5, Blue Jays 78.5, Cardinals at 77.5, Pirates 77.5, Reds 78.5.
If the Pirates weren't in the NL Central division with the Reds, I'd say them, but I think the Nationals. They could be sneaky. Could be sneaky, but they're in a very difficult division as it is. They have to play the Mets, they have to play the Braves, and the Phillies.
Yeah, the Phillies are good too, right? Okay,
Yes.
The best team in baseball will be who? This is a no-brainer, right?
Yes, it's a no-brainer.
The Dodgers?
Yeah.
I have a buddy that went down for spring training in Arizona, sent me a video. He literally got a seat in the second row right behind home plate for Ohtani's first at bat and videotaped it, and he had a home run. I shouldn't say first at bat, but I think it was his first at bat, right? Or first game?
It could have.
And I also noticed they were playing in the spring training for the A's, and I noticed that the A's and their retirement for Ricky Henderson, I don't know if I mentioned this on the air, but
No, you didn't.
they have the 24 on the wall, and it says Ricky.
You think
not
it's because
Henderson.
it's probably because Henderson would not fit, right?
No, I think it's because Ricky Henderson was most known for referring to himself as Ricky. I'm assuming, right? That's the ultimate tribute to Ricky Henderson.
I suppose, but like if you're let's say you're a teenager, you're 14, you're 12, 14 years old, and you have no idea who Ricky Henderson is, and then you just see this thing on the wall that says Ricky. Like you're automatically going to assume that's his last name.
Correct, which I think is the beauty of it, because when he talked like it was his last name.
Mm-hmm.
Now, are you ready for a not unpopular opinion, but one that I will stand clear on? Of the three, and I'll go with three, of the three major sports in this country, and yes, I know soccer and hockey and whatever else, but MLB, NFL, NBA. My opinion, Ricky Henderson, even as praised as he is and as relevant as he is and a Hall of Fame player that he is, Ricky Henderson amongst the three is the most underrated performer of the three sports. He is the most underrated player in the history of professional baseball. He is the all-time leading run scorer. He is the all-time leading leadoff home run hitter. He is the all-time leader in steals by a gabillion margin for single season and career. There is a reason why late in his career, Ricky Henderson was a constant trade deadline movement piece, because teams that were on the cusp of winning went and got Ricky Henderson because he was the kind of guy that would put you over the top.
Yeah.
Fabulous, fabulous player. Atticus is in next. Is that right, Eddie?
Yeah. Don't call me Atticus Finch. Yeah.
Nathaniel, don't call me Atticus Finch, will ride us home because Eddie just got a phone call. This is correct. So you got a phone call and your doggy got out, and your neighbor has the dog safely in the yard, but they have to leave, and so therefore you've got to go get the dog so that the dog is safe, correct?
Yeah, I'm assuming it's Joey, and I'm sure he just jumped over the fence finally.
Finally. Okay. All right, we'll be back. We will get back into, by the way, we talked a lot about Indiana. How about Purdue?
By the way, don't forget you've got tickets to give away, too.
Tickets for?
Pantera.
Pantera once again? All right, we'll see how Atticus can come up with ways for us to do that. And we'll talk a little boiler ball next. We have tickets to give away. Eddie's on the way to go pick up the dog. So Nathaniel, don't call me Atticus Finch, is capably sitting in.
I don't know about that.
Well, you're sitting. I would say it's capably, right? For those that are unfamiliar with Nathaniel's work, although I think most people are relatively familiar because you wear a number of different hats within this radio station. You are the pride of Western Boone, correct?
Oh, yeah. Go Stars.
Collegiately, after being a star, who's the biggest star to come out of Western Boone? Would it be Stacey Pates?
It'd be me, right?
And yourself? That's right. So then collegiately, you went through which program?
Indy. Go Hounds.
Okay. Did you enjoy Indy?
I did.
Okay.
Hung out with Eddie for quite a bit. It was fun.
What was that like?
Ooh. You can imagine.
Kind of speaks for itself.
Eddie,
does it
but
not?
4 years younger. Imagine that.
Eddie
without his maturity.
Well, that kind of goes without saying. We have tickets to give away for Pantera. As a matter of fact, we are going to do that coming up in just a couple of minutes. I will leave it up to you, Nathaniel, as to the fashion in which you would like to give away the tickets, the order of which we do it. We can simply do a caller number, but on cue, because people like to jump in the front of the line, and then that gets old, right? Nobody likes a line jumper.
We got one on the line right now.
Yeah, see, come on. False start. False start offense, 5-yard penalty, repeat first down. But the Pantera show, I'm looking here for the information on the exact specifications on when this concert is taking place. Pantera is going to be Friday, September 5th at the Ruoff Music Center. Friday, September the 5th at Ruoff Music Center. I could simply ask this question. We're going to do a trivia question for it in just a couple of minutes. But let's talk about Purdue in action tonight, taking on Rutgers. And feels to me, Purdue has been, and I think Purdue, where they get a lot of credit, and I think they're going to get this credit. I think they're going to get a chance to cash in this credit, so to speak. From a scheduling standpoint, what Purdue did in the pre-Big Ten was they went out and just said, we're going to play people. And, they went out and played in big athletic teams. They put together, and yes, like Indiana, some of those games they didn't necessarily get. I mean, IU had, the problem was Indiana had 2 of those games and got blown completely out of both of them. But I think Purdue gets credit, number one, because everybody knew that they had to kind of reinvent who they were coming off of the departure of Zach Edey, which is not easy to do. And they kind of had to figure out how you play without him. And they managed, I think Matt Painter did a really good job of kind of coming up with similar sets to what they did with Edey. But obviously you are going about it with Kaufman-Wren, which is totally different because of the lack of size. And then defensively, people figured out that you don't have the rim protection there, and you've got to attack them coming in from the wings. And they were able to, Purdue, for a while hold that off. And then they ran into that skid where teams really took advantage of it and started attacking at them. But if you look at the scheduling they had, I think the losing skid they went on, they are still seen as a top 4 seed. And I think it's because of what they were able to do before the new year. I mean, when you go out and they beat Alabama and they beat Ole Miss, and yeah, sure, they lost to Auburn, but I mean, Auburn is clearly the best team in college basketball, in my opinion, and they lost to Marquette. But Marquette has also upheld their end of the bargain there by, having a good year. Now, they have compiled good wins. Certainly the loss at home to Ohio State is one they'd like to have back. But their losing skid, sure, a rival in Indiana, but the other 3 at least were against ranked teams, and then beating UCLA to get back on the right side of things. If they can beat Rutgers now, I think it completely alleviates that losing streak, and you look at it and you say, even if they're susceptible, and I think they are, but I think the committee would look at it and say, you know what, yeah, they were on their heels a little bit, but they responded to it, and now they're in, Illinois is a wild card. But you win tonight, I think that you kind of move past that 4-game losing skid. And then like I said, Illinois becomes kind of the wild card in the whole thing in the Big Ten tournament. It does feel to me like in the tournament, Purdue does have a susceptibility because of the fact that most teams are going to have the athleticism and the size coming in on the wings to exploit that area where I just don't think they're getting enough down low rotational help. Caleb First has been inconsistent in that area, and Kaufman Wren, when he gets kind of out of sorts and out of rhythm a little bit, can struggle in terms of foul trouble, and we saw it against Indiana, right? Better question for Purdue is, or another question for Purdue is, which one of the two is their better, like, player of the year candidate within the conference, Kaufman Wren or Braden Smith? I personally think Braden Smith. Kaufman Wren might have a little more ceiling to him, but Smith is the engine and the more consistent of the two. Rutgers, on the other hand, tonight, that game's going to be on Peacock, 7 o'clock. Rutgers has a lot of young talent, but I would think, especially considering it's at Mackey, that advantage Purdue. Now, another thing we talked about earlier today. Nathaniel, I'll let you weigh in on this, okay? Somehow or another, and I have no idea how this came into my mind. I mean, that's a dangerous place to try to figure out where things come from and how they do. But I was talking about music yesterday, and notably songs that are synonymous with a scene in a movie, not songs that were written for a movie. Eye of the Tiger was written for Rocky III. Danger Zone was written for Top Gun. The Goonies song by Cyndi Lauper was written for the Goonies. So I'm talking about songs that were already established songs that happen to be put into a movie that then become synonymous with the scene in the movie where they were placed. And people had great suggestions on Twitter for it. I think the overall, Bohemian Rhapsody in Wayne's World is really tough to argue against. In Your Eyes by Peter Gabriel and Say Anything is synonymous with that scene. But talking about that then led my brain to go to this. There are others that come into play here. Freebird would be one. November Rain would be one. A couple of the Frampton Comes Alive songs would be one. But in my opinion, there are a Boardwalk and Park Place on this topic that we broached earlier. Of classic rock songs that have a very long, multi-minute ending. Songs that the song comes on, that you wade and wait through the first couple of minutes of it because the last 3.5 minutes is going to be an absolute joyride. Blare the stereo, roll down the window, let it go, just awesome, and let the music take you somewhere else. There are two songs to me that are the creme de la creme in this category. One of them, and we played both of these earlier, I will let you play example number one. Here you go, Nathaniel. Super solid, right? Impossible not to feel good while it's going, and it just seemingly goes forever, right? Now, here is your example number two that we're going to compete with that. So, obviously, Hey Jude of the Beatles, and then here's number two. Now, which of these two more so are you like, oh, man, awesome? Go back to number one again. Now, do you want to stick with that, or do you think to yourself, no, go back to the other one because it's so strong? Come on, man.
It's got to be Hey Jude.
You going with Hey Jude on this?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, man. Dwayne Allman on that slide guitar with Clapton? Solid.
What makes you happier than hearing this?
It's hard to argue that. But one thing that makes me kind of happy, equally in the good mood, would be almost melancholic, though, is this. Telling you. Both of them are awesome, right? Just 3 minutes of pure bliss, pure joy.
But both of them together, not quite.
Okay, what else puts you in a good mood than this? a Friday night, beautiful night, Indianapolis, late summer, early autumn, clear skies, Ruoff, Pantera's playing. We've got tickets for you to be able to enjoy exactly that, but you got to answer a trivia question. 239-1070 if you would like to try your hand at it next. minutes. Pacers in action tonight. Gainbridge Fieldhouse taking on the Houston Rockets. Houston on a back-to-back, but they did not play the vast majority of their starters. Their highest-paid player, Fred VanVleet, will not participate tonight. He has been dealing with an ankle issue. He missed 11 games, came back, played the other night, then did not play last night. He will not play tonight as well. But many of their young stars, and they got a lot of them for Houston, should be in action tonight. Indiana taking on Oregon in Eugene tonight, and Purdue and Rutgers. We have tickets to give away for Pantera. You just heard them. It will be on September the 5th. I've got a trivia question for the chance to win the tickets. We will begin with Michael from Anderson, who joins us on the show. Hi, Michael. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. Did you grow up in Anderson?
I did, yes.
Madison Heights, Anderson, or Highland?
Anderson High School, the original.
Okay, so you obviously saw a lot of games in the Wigwam, right?
I did, yeah.
Beautiful times. All right, Michael, here is the question I have for you about Pantera. Are you ready?
I am.
I'll give you hints as we go along. Pantera is a band that originated in a suburb city of a major metropolitan area. It happens to be a city where a Major League Baseball team has its home stadium, and the name of the city is also the name of a recently closed Indianapolis Public Schools high school. Can you tell me the name of the city or state for Pantera's hometown? So, in other words, it would be like, Broad Ripple, Florida, something like that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Would it be Arlington, Texas?
Holy cow, Michael. Wow.
Jeez.
Michael, are you a fan of Pantera, or were my hints that solid?
Your hints were solid, but I'm also a fan of Pantera, so I guess I got a lucky question.
Michael, that's impressive. What year did you graduate from Anderson High School, if you don't mind me asking?
1996.
96. All right, so that would have been – Kojak would have been around your age, right?
He was a senior when I was a freshman.
Yeah, Kojak Fuller could play. But I'll tell you what, Michael, Kojak's brother, Archie Fuller, I thought was the better player of the two. Kojak was wonderful, but Archie Fuller, who had 49 in the semi-state in 91, he was a hell of a player. Michael, hang on the line, and Nathaniel will get all of your information and send you on about your way. J&V has walked in. J&V, by the way, John, you are going to be so proud of me on this. You ready for this?
Yes.
I think I beat your record by a day. I was locked out of my email, and I got it all sorted out in a 2-day period. That's got to be a new track record, right? All right, so what you got going on?
We do high school starts tonight, sectional play. First night of that, I got a big night of college basketball. Purdue, Rutgers, IU, Oregon, Pacers, Rockets. You watched any of the Rockets last night at all?
I did not. I mean, I saw obviously Shea Gilgeous-Alexander went 51. Yeah. Van Fleet's not playing tonight either. No. By the way, in honor of the high school basketball tournament getting underway, you played how many years at Eastern Green?
4.
All 4. Okay, you went the furthest. Which of those years?
I think we got beat in the sectional every year first game.
Okay. Your last game in the sectional.
I was 2 of Kim from 3. I didn't have a good time.
Okay, let me ask you this.
I'm always salty.
Okay,
yeah.
Your sectionals were played where?
Switch City.
And okay, Switch City is. Pardon me for this. I'm going to sound like an idiot here.
It's where White River Valley is.
Okay, I was going to say what.
Talking to Matt Graves today, Indiana
Right.
State's coach. That's where he went. That's where Andrew, AJ. That's where all the Graves kids went.
But
yeah.
that's a pretty cool gym, right?
Oh, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the West Gym, Center Grove.
And I'm
just
sorry,
like
you
that.
said you lost to Switch City. That's who knocked you
we
out.
lost to what was that? Bloomfield, something
Who
like that.
was in your sectional?
Bloomfield, Linton. At the time, it was Switch City before the consolidation of White River Valley. L&M. Prior to me, my early stages of high school, Oliphant and Patterson
Right.
played at L&M.
L&M had a heck of a team. 85,
Worthington.
right? Was it 85 or 86 for L&M when they were?
It was 84 and then 85.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. 85, they lose to Bossy in the regional, I think, something like that. Or how far? I can't remember. They lose.
I mean,
to
I don't know.
Boise?
They
I
were
thought in
featured.
'84 they lost to Terre Haute South in the regional.
They went. I mean, they were featured in Sports
Or did they
Illustrated
lose to
one of
Southridge?
those years.
It may have been Southridge. Remember, Southridge kept coming out during that era, those mid '80s. They would end up in the Final Four with Marion.
Right.
That's when Marion
Yeah,
started
I mean,
their
forget
Purple
about it,
Rain
right?
run.
So when I was in high school, North Central, my senior year, final game that we lost was to Southport. That was in the Hinkle Regional.
Yeah.
But the Hinkle Sectional then was Lawrence North, Lawrence Central, Chittard Cathedral, Arlington Tech, North Central, and there's one other one that I always
A little
forget.
bit different than Switch
awesome.
City and L&M and
It was just so cool
Linton
to
and
play.
Shakamak. I think Arlington and Shakamak are very like.
That's right. It was just so cool to play on a Thursday night
Yeah.
in Hinkle with, I mean, all of it, right? Under the lights.
No, I was
mean,
was
under the
just
lights,
awful.
obviously, but it was
just kind of seemed like in those moments.
the sunlight coming through on the Saturday games. I mean, it was just so cool, man. All of it was pretty awesome. But so it's fun to I remember also it felt like, Anderson would always come out of like the Lafayette semi-state and just the anticipation of seeing these teams that you'd heard about throughout the year but hadn't seen them play. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it all gets underway tonight, and
It does.
one of the things that you'll cover. So, and also you said you got Matthew on tonight or today?
What's that?
You're talking
Matt
a little
Graves,
ISU?
I'm sorry. Matt Graves, Indiana State's on today. Yeah, so we'll do that. They play, when do they play? Thursday, I think. They have to win 4.
It's so
in Arch
funny,
Madness.
John. Somebody posted a picture yesterday. I was scrolling through social media, and a guy that I know from St. Louis who was at the SLU game
Yeah.
and just happened to post a picture like, hey, I'm at the SLU game, St. Louis University at the SLU game. And it was so funny because it's a picture of the court, and literally he just a random action shot. And who do you think's at the top of the key holding
Robbie
the basketball?
Avila.
He's standing at the top of the key holding the ball, and I thought, man, they are running the exact same sets, exact same
They
play.
are, yeah.
And I think
They're
they're
third
starting.
place right now in the A-10. I think
Well,
St.
I
Louis
think
is.
it's starting to come together for them a little bit, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
So you can see these guys. Conwell has had a pretty good year offensively with
Right.
Xavier. Xavier's going to be in here at Butler coming up on Wednesday at Hinkle. Who was it? Kent. Jason Kent and Julian Larry went to Texas. I don't think either one of those guys get starters minutes at all. So they got paid though.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
they-
why not? You know what I mean?
They go to Texas.
Man,
so.
that was fun last year.
Yeah,
Last
it
year in
was
Hinkle.
so fun and yeah, it's been tough. There have been moments from Matt, but it's been a tough season for sure.
All right, John's up next.
Yep.
We will be back with you at noon tomorrow to recap everything that he's about to set you up for. Big night in basketball. We'll talk about it all tomorrow, and we thank you for listening to Query & Company.